me share my slide presentation with you. And actually, you know what? Let me let me share this with you. We're going to talk about reflexes today, but there's a reason I want to talk about them. So hold on, let me share this cute little thing here. Hold on. I should be sharing. Here we go. Hold on. It's coming. Again, the system's running slow. My system and the computer. There we go. Come on. Miss Dowler, you raised your hand, madam.
Yes. I have a question about yesterday's lecture.
Sure.
So, on page 587, there's that diagram of the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system.
Sure. Okay.
I'm wondering, as a massage therapist, what I care about this diagram, and especially because the parasympathetic starts in the brain and goes through to the face before going down, and then the sympathetic is located in the mid, the thoracic lumbar regions. Does any of that have any bearing on what I could do through a massage?
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. I really like the way you think, Miss Dowler. I don't know, and I don't know what picture you're talking about, and I need to go look at it, but you have my word that I'm going to look at it and get back to you on that, maybe even after break. I want to look at it, and I don't want to stop right now, but I never thought about it, but I now want to think about it, so thanks to you. I suspect it does, by the way. Let me look at the picture. What page is it on?
On page 587.
587. Awesome. Okay. You and I, at least, if not everybody, will discuss this. Yeah, I just don't know the picture or anything. Yeah. Thank you, ma'am. Really good. All right, so, it's fascinating. I learn more from you guys than you do from me, so. Can we all see this picture of a stretch reflex up here? So, this is going to be important to kind of some of the stuff I'm going to go over today. So, your body has reflexes built in, and a reflex is basically something that goes through your nervous system that doesn't actually make it to your brain. It goes actually from an area of your body to your spinal cord and gets looped back to that area. And stretch reflexes are designed to prevent you from overstretching. So, I don't care that you memorize this diagram or anything. It doesn't matter at all, actually. It matters that you realize that your body has some automatic wiring that uses your nervous system, where your nervous system it believes there's a rapid stretch going on, something's going too fast or too far. It sends a signal that gets to your spinal cord, doesn't even make it to your brain. You might get a signal to your brain that you're feeling something, don't get me wrong. But it sends back a signal to a muscle usually to stop that stretch. So, I'm going to stop sharing this for a second, even after I just went through all that trouble to share it. So, we don't think about this very often, but, oh wow, questions? Yes. Mr. Cuppage, yes.
Where does that happen besides your kneecap?
Well, stretch reflexes happen everywhere. Oh. Now, the kneecap is a very convenient way to hit and set off a stretch reflex, and they're doing that like in the doctor's office just to check your nervous system. They're checking to make sure things are working. But they're really, in that situation, actually hitting it just right to make it think there's a stretch response going on, and it's not. So that's why I meant that picture is not too important. But what's important is to realize there's this loop that if a tendon, especially a tendon, which attaches muscle to bone, thinks it's getting stretched too fast or too far or too hard, it sends a signal that gets sent right back to stop that muscle.
Gotcha.
And it's extremely important because we're going to talk about something called PNF stretching in just a minute here. Mr. Kachekian.
Is this related to like hyperextension?
It would try to prevent hyperextension. Yeah.
Okay.
Especially if you're doing it fast, yes. It would try to prevent that. Yeah. So, I mean, some people could slowly hyperextend themselves because they have hypermobile joints. That's fine. But yes, it's trying to prevent you from hyperextending. It's trying to prevent you from tearing. So, Miss Vega, have you ever seen Drew just go crazy and he's throwing his arms all over the place and he's running around and things like that and just being the nutty kid? There is a reason he doesn't tear his arms out of their socket when he does that. Because he's got the power to do it. He has the power to rip his own, I don't mean fall off his body, rip them out, but he has the power to rip his own muscles, believe it or not. He has the strength to accelerate fast enough to rip his own muscles, to rip his own tendons and ligaments. His body has systems to stop him from doing that, and you guys do too. So, it's another fail-safe on our body, and if our tendons think they're getting stretched too far, a signal usually gets sent back to the brain to either shut down the muscle that's stretching them too far, or to fire the opposite muscle and stop the movement from going that far. So this is a bad example, but if my body thinks my bicep is going too far, if my body thinks my bicep is going too far, it can send two different signals. One is it can send a signal to actually just turn off. It can send a signal to either flex the bicep so it'll pull back up and not go so far. Yes? It can also send a signal to turn off the tricep to quit pulling it out so far. The point is it can literally override my intentions to stop me. Now you can concentrate enough to go past that if you really need to, but that's what stretch reflexes do. They keep you from stretching too far. Yeah? So, there is a type of stretching called PNF stretching. It stands for proprio neuromuscular facilitation. Proprio neuromuscular facilitation. And the reason it's called that is you have sensors in your muscles called propriosensors. And they sense things like stretch. They sense when you are stretching a muscle too far or a tendon too far, and they attempt to stop that. But you can override them in a good way and get somebody to stretch further. And I'm going to give you an example of that right now, actually I think with an actual human body. So, hold on. 1 second, I'm grabbing a human body. Okay, so I've got somebody coming in because I want to use a human body to kind of show you guys. And we are going to put her down here. Okay. All right. Can you just lay down here, head there, face up.
Face up.
Feet down here. Okay. Awesome. Can we see the young lady on this table? I hope. Yep. Good. All right. This is Heather, by the way. She teaches ophthalmic. She teaches the eye program here. So if any of you want to continue on and learn about eyeballs, she's excellent. You could be a eyeball inspecting, massage therapist, rubbing, dual trained person. All right. So I need to turn up the camera a tiny bit just to catch all of this. Hold on. So here's what happens when we go to stretch Heather or any other human being. As I lift her leg up, I want to make a couple of points that are really important. First thing is, I don't know how far to stretch her. I've said this before, but I'm going to say it again because it's this important. The resistance I'm getting on her leg right now does not tell me how far to stretch her. Some people, I'm literally like this, and they're like, you can go further. Other people, I've literally got a finger here, and they're like, whoa! Don't believe anybody that tells you that they know how far to stretch somebody based on resistance. You will hear this from a lot of massage therapists, and I rarely say this, but they're 100% wrong 100% of the time. They've been poorly stretching people their whole life, and they're either injuring them or not stretching them at all. I honestly don't know if she's in a stretch right now. You don't have to hold your leg. I got it.
Okay.
I feel like you're helping me. You're very sweet. She's very nice. She's helping me, but I don't know. And this is why I don't do a lot of stretching and massage, and I believe in stretching. I love stretching, but it's time consuming because what I really have to do is I have to say, Heather, can you go further?
Yes.
Okay. And she said yes, and not only did she say yes, I listened to the tone of her voice. If people go, yes, kind of scared like, I know it's just a little bit, but if they're like yes, then it's probably a lot more. And I have to check that. Can we go a little bit further still?
A little bit.
A little bit, okay. So she's getting to her tension level, and by the way, I gotta tell you, I'm not feeling a lot of tension on her leg. I would have guessed she could go a lot further. And I would have guessed wrong. And stretching is one of those things that you can tear muscles. It's much more dangerous. You go too deep in your deep tissue, you bruise somebody and they're fine a week later. You go stretch somebody too far and you tear a muscle, or you tear a tendon off a bone, and you've crippled them. It's pretty serious. And the other alternative is this. You don't go far enough, and then I'm like, are you getting a lot out of this, Heather? She's like, no, you're holding my leg up like an idiot, and I'm paying $100 for this. $100. So either way, she either hates me because I'm doing nothing, or she hates me because I'm doing too much. Okay. So, with the greatest respect to her, for the purpose of this presentation, and I would never say this, ever, she's not very flexible. Her legs only come up this far. She knows that. I would never say that, but Heather's really cool about us. Because I want to make a point here. So, this is good, huh? Okay. This is good. She's getting a stretch here. Okay. What happens if I start to push her further is her stretch reflex kicks in. Her hamstrings and back, and by the way, when I touch them, they're taut. They're tight. Her hamstrings and back, her body will literally unconsciously tell her to flex her hamstrings to pull her leg back down so I don't stretch her too far. That's a protective measurement. Okay? But that stretch reflex is usually set way too light. So here's the part I want you to conceive. Right now her stretch reflex is, say, sensing, and I'm guessing at this, it doesn't matter, it's just a made up number. Guessing it's stretching 30
Can
pounds.
you bring my agenda in the car, please?
Miss Flores, mute yourself.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. So,
Oh, you can hear me now?
I can hear you now. Now it works. We couldn't hear it before.
Oh.
All right, so let's say it's sensing, her hamstrings are sensing 30 pounds of stretch. And her brain is like, we can't go past 30 pounds of stretch. Probably, by the way, because she's not that flexible, and she probably never bends over because she knows she's not that flexible, and so her body just thinks she can't go past 30 pounds of stretch. I'm going to have her press against me, which will use her hamstrings. She's going to try to put her foot back down on the table, and that's going to increase the tension on her hamstrings without moving her leg farther, because if she pushes against me, she's not going to feel 30 pounds of stretch, she's going to feel 50 pounds of stretch, because she's fighting against me. I'm going to explain why here in a second. So, I'm going to ask her, I'm going to say, Heather, just using 10% of your strength, I don't want her to throw me to the ground, 10% of your strength, I want you to push against me for 10 seconds. And she's doing it now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, let go. I don't know if you guys saw, but her leg just went up further, significantly. You doing okay? Yeah, and her face looks the same as before. What happened was we just reset her stretch reflex. Her brain went, oh, I guess we can handle 50 pounds of stretch. We were fine, and so now I'm able to lift it up higher. It's very cool. That is PNF stretching in a nutshell. It's proprioreceptive neuromuscular facilitation. We reset the proprioreceptors in her body to accept they could go further. Yeah? Stay right here. I got to use you for one more thing in a second. Okay. So, I don't want to reset the camera.
Can you repeat that? Proprio what?
proprioreceptive, because you have these proprioceptors. They're on the ends of nerves telling you if you stretch too far. They're like gold. We're going to look at them later in the slideshow, but they're Golgi tendon organs and spindles. But anyway, proprioreceptive, kind of to see inside you really. Neuromuscular, nerves and muscles, facilitation. We're facilitating this process. So all of us have this so that we don't bend over too far and tear stuff, right? But when you don't bend over at all the time, they get set really short, basically. And by putting stretch on there, the body's like, oh, I can handle more stretch, then it realizes it can go further. So when she fought against me, she increased the tension on those tendons. But then when she let go, the body's like, oh, well, we've got more to go from here. We've got less tension on us, and so I was able to lift her leg further. That's proprioreceptive neuromuscular facilitation. You will hear it called by 1,000 different things because everybody's got a new variation, because people love creating new variations of stuff so they can market it. So there's PDQ, XYZ stretching, but it's all proprioreceptive neuromuscular facilitation, basically. Trust me on this one. I like to turbocharge it with something else called reciprocal inhibition. And I'm going to show you about that right now. We're going to put them together. What is reciprocal inhibition? Reciprocal inhibition is that when I'm doing bicep curls, my body is very smart and it sends an automatic signal to my tricep. Are you guys still there? Because my screen just froze. Oh, good. Sends an automatic signal to my tricep to shut off. My body doesn't want my tricep to fight my bicep when I'm doing bicep curls, so it sets an automatic signal to shut off. So we can use this to our advantage, and we can double up two techniques together. When Heather here helps, I don't want you to do this right now, just relax. But when she helps to lift her own leg, using the muscles on top, it will send a signal to shut off the hamstrings on the bottom, so they won't fight me. So we can do two things. We can have her push against me to reset her thing, and I'm going to have her help me lift her leg, which will use her muscles on top, which will shut off her hamstrings underneath. So we're using proprioreceptive neuromuscular facilitation and reciprocal inhibition to our advantage. And you know how I lecture. I'm going to show you this all on slides, all that kind of stuff again, but I wanted to give you an example of this because it's really cool and it works really well. So what I'm going to do for this, and this is how I do stretching, basically. First I'm going to find out how high she can go up, okay? Right? I'm going to say, get in a good position here. I'm going to say, how's that? Is that about? Okay, it's about okay. All right, she says this is about where she's at. This is it for her. Now, I'm going to ask her to do the same thing she did last time with 10% of her body power. Try to put her leg back down on the table. Please do that now. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Now help me lift your leg up. Boom. She helped me lift her leg up. We've almost got her at 90 degrees right now for somebody that probably hasn't been at 90 degrees for a while. I'm the same way, by the way. I don't mean to.
Oh,
Yeah, she's fine. Thank you. I would never talk to anybody else like this, but Heather and I are tight and we're abusive to each other.
Yes.
Let's do it one more time. Push against me one more time. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Help me lift. Boom. And now I might do that 3 times. She's at 90 now. So it's pretty impressive. And Mr. Barr, can you let them in? I hope you're on the thing, maybe you're not. Anyway, it's pretty impressive. And I do this a few times, and after a while you feel their legs shake because their muscle gets so tired of pushing against you that they can't do anymore. And at the end here, I hold it. I'm holding it because I'm trying to build new fascial memory. I want her body to remember she can be in this position, so hold it for at least 20 seconds. If I can do it longer, I would. Yeah? Thank you. That's all I needed.
That's it?
That's it.
All
I just
right.
needed a leg so badly. Thank you. Let me let this person in. So, there, I have to let the person, okay. So, yes, Miss Smith, please, talk to me.
Can you just repeat that last thing you said? You said you want to hold it for 20 seconds to reset the fascia, or what did you say?
Yeah, I don't know that, I don't even know what I said, but what I meant was, I'm holding it for at least 20 seconds at the end to kind of set a new fascial memory. To be like, you can really be here. I mean, to make sure the stretch really takes hold. To give the body time to retrain. If they'll let me hold it there 2 minutes, I will. But sometimes we don't have time in the massage. Sometimes the person doesn't have patience for that, whatever. But the longer, within reason, the longer you hold it there, the more likely it is the body's going to say, this is a new normal place to be. And we just made all those gains, and then I want it to be a new normal place to be. Kind of like if you guys are a runner, and you get up to where runners are always trying to build a base. So you have to kind of struggle to get up to a certain mileage. Like you finally get it to where you can run, 3 miles 3 times a week. That becomes your base. And then maintaining it's not so hard, but you still have to go out and run once a week to maintain it. I want to hold it there just to create a new baseline. Any stretch this is true, even if you're not doing PNF stretching. I would hold it for 20 seconds minimum so that you get some improvement, and longer is better. But the client usually determines how long, because usually the client's like, okay, that's enough. And I would do an entire stretching massage, but a lot of clients want you to rub them. They don't want to be stretched. And so I often save my stretching for really troublesome areas. Like with Heather that was on here, her hamstrings were short enough that it might bother her low back. And so it might make a lot of sense to stretch her that way that we just did. And this stretching works terribly good for hamstrings. It works for everything, but it just works really well for this. And hamstrings can have a lot to do with low back problems. So let me review what we did today. We tricked the body. I'll put the names back in a second, but basically you have something that senses how hard your muscles are pulling and stops you. And we had somebody work against us, and it made the muscle think it was pulling even harder, and then when they let go, we could go further. And then we also have something that when one muscle's in action, it shuts off the one on the opposite side. So we stretched Heather. We had her push against us to reset this thing to go further, and we had her help us push it further because that sent a signal to shut off the muscle that was being stretched. So we used reciprocal inhibition, which goes on in your body all the time. When I take a step forward and use my front muscles, it shuts off my back muscles. It tries so that I'm not fighting myself is the idea. That's called reciprocal inhibition. We use it to our advantage and have the client help us lift their leg to shut off the muscles underneath her leg. We also had her push against us to help reset her Golgi tendon organs, her proprioceptors. So that's neuromuscular facilitation, proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation, PNF stretching, which we will go more into in this course, but I always like to introduce stuff a couple of times. I like to put them together because you're always trying to get as much done in your massage as quickly as possible. That is really the only difference between a good massage therapist and a bad massage therapist. Anybody can massage. It just takes some people 4 hours to get done what you can do in 10 minutes because they don't know what they're looking for, they don't know what they're doing, they don't know where the muscles are, they don't know how to rub them, right? And so they'll accidentally eventually hit that spot, but you can do it faster. Now please be careful. Don't ever massage quicker. That's usually not the answer. Usually you want to be getting more done, but you're actually massaging slowly. But you want the most power-packed movements you can get. So I like to put 3 stretches together. I put PNF stretching where you push against me. I put reciprocal inhibition where you help me lift. And then I put static stretching. Static stretching is where I hold it there at the end. So I static stretch you to find your limit. I have you push against me to reset that limit. I help you lift that thing to reciprocally inhibit the thing that we're trying to stretch. And then I statically hold it at your new set point for as long as you'll let me. It's a very, very effective, and there are many variations of this, and by variations, I think they're ridiculous variations, where they'll have them lift first, then push second twice, then lift first once. On a Tuesday, whatever. It's all the same stuff. I'm not kidding you, and they call them all these different things, but the fact is, it's all basically what I just showed you, and And I'm not saying that somebody hasn't figured out a slightly better way to do it. Maybe they have, but the point is, this is truly the core of this type of stretching. Miss Cuppage.
So when you first start out with the stretch, two things. How long do you, before you do the reciprocal inhibition part, like how long do you start with the original stretch? Because I feel like sometimes muscles aren't ready for that and they need like a little bit of time to go, okay, it's time to engage. And then you do the resistance, and then they can go further, or even like inhaling and then exhaling at the same, while you're also doing that. So how long do you hold that original stretch before you have them do the other stuff?
I don't. I find their limit, and then I have them press right away. But Ms. Cuppage, actually, you make a really good point. I could not argue against the practice of finding that limit, holding that, and having them take a couple breaths, right? And kind of set into that. I don't think that's a ridiculous thing to do at all. It's just not the way I do it, probably because I feel under a time crunch. But I can't argue against that at all. You might even be suggesting a better way to do it, more time consuming way to do it too. Yeah. But possibly better. But then then I have them push, and by the way, I push and I have them lift. I put both those together, right? I push, and then when they let go of the push, they help me lift, and I help them lift. I put those together right away every time. Why not? Push and lift, push and lift, push and lift, push and lift, and hold.
And stretch. Sorry. Are you kind of using the word lift and stretch as synonymous in a way?
Yes, sorry. In this case, I am, right? I'm lifting their leg, which is stretching them. They're lifting their leg, which is stretching them. Yes. Okay. I'm using them as synonymous. You're absolutely right. And by the way, when I explain this to the client, you can't tell the client things like contract your hamstrings.
Yeah.
Even if they know where hamstrings are, they're not usually able to do that. I have to tell them things like, in a minute, when I tell you to, I want you to, with just 10% of your body power, and with guys, sometimes I tell them 5%. Not because guys are stronger, but
they
because
want to show you how strong they are.
They want to show you how strong they are. And they love it. So sometimes they'll be like, oh, no, with you it's 3%. Okay.
So when you do...
Yeah, go ahead.
Is that just what you do with legs then? Or do you do... I mean, I know that we're just...
You can do it with any muscle in the body in theory.
Okay.
But it's tricky with some areas, right? It's just tricky. And the reason I normally am doing it with legs is because they tend to affect pelvic and back issues and stuff that I care about more. But you can do it, it works very well with hamstrings, calves, quads. Yeah.
I did it a little bit on at Miss Smith's neck one time. I saw this contraction thing. And
you could. By the way, it actually does work really well. So if you gently push up the neck, and then she tries to put her neck back down on the table, and then she helps you lift her head. And it's a nice controlled way where she has some control over what you're doing.
Yeah.
That's the
I
other
did
thing
it on
really
the side. I didn't do it on the lifting part, on the extension. I did. I had a press against my hand. Yeah. She's the only one I did that to.
And by the way, everybody, all of this is safe if you go slow. And I was telling this to some other students the other day, but for some weird reason, I see this a lot where people, when they're stretching somebody, they go slow, 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 and then right at the end, they go fast. Go fast at the beginning, slow down as you get closer to the threshold. Go slow at the end. But anyway, if you go slow and you kind of keep an eye on their face, when their eyebrows their eyes roll back in their head, you've gone way too far. You know what I mean? Just kind of keep an eye on them. And talk to them. I mean, honestly, Heather here, I felt almost no resistance in her hamstrings, and she's like, that's my limit. I would have never guessed that. Never guessed that. And that's pretty common, that you just don't know. And I've honestly had people that I am bracing myself against the wall, pushing on that leg. And they're like, I can go further. I'm like, oh my gosh, because their fascia is just that strong. Yeah. Mr. McClure.
So, does this apply for muscle rehab?
Yes. Yes. So here's some other really cool stuff about this. All right. Thank you for asking this. Stretching is a very interesting thing that's still not fully understood. And I'm not trying to tell you that I fully understand it. But we used to think stretching was just stretching. Anybody who does yoga will tell you that stretching actually has a major strength component to it. And one of the things that, and this ties into rehab, sir, one of the things that's very interesting about stretching is the other reason we think you can only bend over so far is not just because I'm worried about tearing, but my brain unconsciously realizes that who's going to get me back up out of this position? I am. And so it tends to not want to let me get in a position where it doesn't have strength to get me back up. And any of you who have worked out might have noticed this. You're not strong in any part of the movement you don't perform. So let me try to explain that to you before we go on break here, because it's actually really interesting. If I do really short bicep curls, sometimes you see guys in the gym do this thing, right? They're never kind of getting their arm back out. Let me get back here. They're kind of doing these little bicep curls, you know. They're not strong down here. I don't care how strong they got here. They can lift 100 pounds here. If you give them that 100 pounds down here, they can't move it. The strength doesn't translate. They're only strong through the parts of the movement they actually exercise, because the way muscles work and contract and stuff. So if my body thinks that I can't get my arm out here or bend over a certain part and I don't have the strength to get back up, it won't let me go that far. So one of the ways you increase, one of the reasons that people that do yoga are so flexible is they get down in these positions and they're holding them. They're holding their own body weight. And they get stronger at the end of movements. And so their body's like, oh, well, we can get back up, which means we can go further. Anyway, this ties into muscle rehab, because muscle rehab is about strengthening muscles in its, especially strengthening muscle in its awkward positions, in the areas where it feels the weakest. And this type of thing where you're having the client push against you is resistance. It's resistance, and they're building up strength in the very area they need usually, which is at the end of the movement. They go to the gym, they build up general strength, but they're building up movement at the end of the thing. It can really help to rehab a muscle. Absolutely. Couldn't agree more.
So let's say you have a client that falls, or like my buddy who was hit by a car on his bike. There's no reason why a 23-year-old kid can lift his arm all the way up in the full range of motion, but he could only lift it 90 degrees.
Yeah.
So, and he couldn't go out, or he had restricted range of motion. Would that be his brain basically saying, well, I don't know if I can lift it up here because I don't know if I can get back?
Yeah, that could be all. So that the body could be splinting it. The brain goes, it's going to hurt up there, so I'm not going to let you go up there. If it perceives that you're going to take it into an area of pain, it could do that. It could be set short, you're right, where the brain's saying, I don't think we should travel that far. You would want, and we don't know exactly. It could be either one of those things, though, sure. And by the way, he could have something mechanically wrong that's not allowing his arm to go up. By the way, though, let's go back a little bit. If he can go up this far but no higher, very likely, and if you can put your finger, first thing I do is put my finger on his acromion process. Is he able to accomplish this without his acromion process going up? It tells me his glenohumeral joint, his shoulder socket joint's working pretty good. What's not working good is his scapulothoracic joint.
Right.
So first I want to determine that. But then you're right. Then I think it'd be very safe to slowly have him resist against you and try to lift up slowly with him helping you lift up, and see if that can't start to nudge that limit up there a little bit. It shouldn't be painful. If it's painful, stop.
I don't. That wasn't my area of, what do you call it, practice. So
Yeah.
It was out of my scope of practice.
Yeah. Well, you could do it in massage, and it's actually pretty safe as long as the client as long as you're going slow and the client says it feels okay. And I have seen dramatic increases in movement in one session with that type of thing. Where somebody, you're right, the brain's kind of splinted it because they were so injured and they don't realize they can go up that far, and you have them resist a little bit against you and help lift up, and they're like, oh. And sometimes, by the way, if it's the very first time I've done it and they've been in an accident, that kind of stuff, I just stop and hold there, and I say, next session we'll try a little bit further, just to make sure they adapt to that well. But, yeah, I wouldn't be afraid to try that. Mr. Kachekian.
Would deep breathing while you're doing that kind of deep breathing while the person is stretching really help in terms of like blood flow and oxygen going to that area of the body?
Yeah, it definitely helps with that. It also
to like ease the pain of it, I'm thinking.
it also helps them to not fight themselves, and so deep breathing would be very helpful. Period. I mean, I agree with you exactly what you said, but I'm also adding on top of that. I think it would help them to not fight themselves and to learn to relax and let go. I think it's extremely important. Couldn't agree with you more. Cool. This is a good place to take a break, everybody. Let's come back at 9:18. So that is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation mixed with reciprocal inhibition. But even if you forget all that, you have the client push against you so that that muscle realizes it can take more tension than it thought it could. And then you have the client help you lift the muscle into a new position or pull the muscle into a new position to send a signal to shut off the muscle you're stretching so you can get further. You put those two things together. And then at the end, hold it in what's called a static stretch for a while to build new muscle memory, to build new fascial memory, to give it time to settle in, to let the concrete re-harden. I don't like that example. Anyway, let it learn this new way. Cool? All right. Let's talk a little bit more about receptors. So let me first explain what a receptor is, quite literally. Remember yesterday I said it's all wires, and I meant it. They're living wires, but they come from the brain and they go wherever they're going, and that's where they go, and they go to a muscle and tell a muscle to fire, or they have a sensor on the end of them. And that sensor is a receptor. And they're highly specialized. Each receptor only picks up one thing. It's a sensor or receptor is the same thing, and it's a thing at the end of the wire that senses heat, or senses pressure, or senses pain, or senses tissue damage, or senses rapid movement, or senses all sorts of things. And your brain puts together all those signals and says, oh my gosh, we got a pressure sensor going off, we got 72 pressure sensors going off, we've got a rapid movement going off, we've got vibration, they even sense vibration going off from other sensors, and our nociceptors, which are our pain receptors, are going off. We must have tissue damage going on, and it can put all that together and kind of figure out what's going on. And then you look down at your finger and realize you put it through a bandsaw or something. I don't know. The fact is, I don't know where I came up with something so graphic, but anyway, the point is, that's how your brain puts stuff together. So, let me just share this slide thing again. No, that's not what we want. That's what we want. Okay. Got a couple more things to go over. Then we'll release some homework and let you guys finish that up. So, your book is giving some labels to some things. Once again, you know me, I don't care about the labels, but I care about the idea behind them. Perception really is the interpretation of sensory information. I kind of made this point, I think I made this point very strongly yesterday, that what your brain gets from your sensors is beep, 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 beep. And your brain is brilliant and says, we've got 75 beeps coming from pressure sensors, we've got 2 coming from something else, and 3 coming from here, and they're coming from the wires that come from your pinky. This person must be feeling pressure on their pinky. And it's very good at reading that stuff. And because you've learned over time, when you ran around as a baby and you were touching stuff, your brain's like, oh, that's what that feels like. That's what that means. Yeah? So you guys do this all the time too, by the way. You know, the sound of your cell phone. You have a particular ring. And the minute you hear it, it instantly alerts you your cell phone's going off. Not you hear somebody else's ring and it doesn't do that for you. You've learned to read that thing. Well, your brain's almost learned to read the music of your nerves. Because it really does come across as dee-dee-dee-dee-dee, but like a symphony of dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. And your brain's like, oh, that's a kitty cat I'm petting. Like it really does learn to read that. It's quite beautiful. That's perception, though. And it is a learned behavior. And when people, by the way, have strokes and lose certain parts of their functioning parts of their brain, they have to literally relearn perception. People that get their eyesight back who've been blind their whole life because of a particular problem they were able to fix will tell you when they got their eyesight back, it was not pleasant at first. It's quite overwhelming because all those beep beeps come rushing, flooding into your head. They don't just see all of a sudden. You learn to see. You learn to distinguish the outlines of bodies and stuff like that. It's apparently quite unpleasant in the beginning. And you have to learn to interpret all that eye data coming in when you've never had it before. Mr. McClure.
So, many years ago, my dog bit off the tip of my finger,
Yeah.
my pointer finger, and they stitched it to my palm to help the blood flow keep going to the tip.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
And then when they took the stitches out, I still had restricted range of motion. So one of my therapists said to put my right hand, that happened on my left hand, they said to put my right hand by a mirror so it was reflected so it looked like it was my left hand and go through range of motion. And it tricked my brain into thinking that my left hand was going through the range of motion too, and I could feel the muscles in my left hand releasing, even though my left hand wasn't moving.
Yeah.
It blew like several paradigms of mine about what healing is and where it starts.
Yeah. I absolutely love that story for 35 reasons right now and 14 other I'll discover later. But yeah. So you utilize pathways your brain already believed were there to reconvince it that it had those pathways still in the other hand. It's, yes, beautiful.
And it became aware that, oh wait, I have these muscles still. Those were tricky. As far as perception and adaptation goes,
This is part of what, like, my old massage teacher used to say, you know, one of your jobs, he put things in very simple terms, but he was very right. He said one of your jobs is just try to get your client to lay flat on the table. And what he meant by that is you're trying to build them to get back into good posture, which is lying flat on the table. Some people can't do that. And he's like, you're trying to reconvince their body of what good posture feels like and how to get back into it and all that kind of stuff. And that's kind of, in a simple way, that same thing. Yes. Yeah. And I love the theme of this class so far, which is, it all starts up here first. It really does. Mr. Kachekian.
When you have like nerves going from like one, like your brain to like your arm out here,
Sure.
Is that the same nerve that goes from your brain to the other arm, or is it a totally different nerve? Like, is it two nerves, or is it one nerve sending that signal?
It's two nerves. Or it's 2 billion separate nerves, but yet it's different. They're completely different. They might be coming off the same sides of the spine. Well, not same sides, even opposite sides of the spine, the same place, but two completely different nerves. You have a fully dedicated wire to every single sensor in your body and every single muscular bundle. Now, sometimes that's one muscle fiber. Sometimes there's 10 muscles fibered together. They all fire together, but you have one nerve dedicated to every single tiny perception you have and every single tiny movement you do. A fully dedicated wire running from that thing back to the brain. Running from that thing back to the spine, up the spine to the brain. Fully dedicated wire. Yeah. So, perception is learning to interpret the beep, 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 beeps of those wires, which you guys do very well. And as you massage more, you're getting better at perceiving things that you feel under the skin. You're actually learning new perceptions. You're learning like, oh, that subtle little thing is their fascia moving off that thing. Oh, that subtle little bump, that's not a knot, that's a bone. You don't know that at first. Nobody does, and you start to learn it. Adaptation is the idea that if I keep setting off a sensor, it starts to desensitize. Why are we telling you this? Because it's important in massage. It's one of the reasons we go slow when we go deep. If I go slow and kind of hold the pressure there, your nerves don't feel so assaulted. And they decrease in sensitivity and I'm able to get in the tissue better. That's the reason I have this up here. So adaptation is a good thing in a way. It's this concept that if your nerves can slowly adapt to the pressure or whatever you're doing to them, they desensitize and don't get alarmed by it so much. I put the frog in boiling water here, which is, if you throw a frog in boiling water, it will jump back out. But if you put a frog in a pot of cool water and then turn up the heat so it slowly becomes hotter and hotter and hotter, it'll stay in and just boil. Please don't try this. Please don't harm any frogs in the making of this video. Awesome. Okay. We're not getting... Okay. One of the most important... There's all these different proprioreceptors. All these different proprioreceptors. Meaning there's all these different sensors, like I told you, at the end of nerves. And each nerve only has one receptor on it. One of the most important ones for you to remember, because you'll hear people talk about it, are nociceptors. Nociceptors provide nociception. Don't worry about that. But nociceptors. Nociceptors literally in your body sense for the chemicals that are released when there's tissue damage. They're nicknamed pain receptors. But again, they don't really make you feel pain. They tell, I'm kind of moving forward to where we need to get to. They tell you that you're actually getting tissue damage. So when your brain has a nociceptor go off, you still don't feel pain. You just feel dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee-dee. But your brain might be like, oh, that's one nociceptor going off. There's some tiny cellular damage. Your brain, by the way, doesn't worry about one nociceptor going off. Probably doesn't even alert you. You probably don't even feel it. But when you cut yourself and there's all this tissue damage, and when you make a little paper cut, a tiny little paper cut, you might have 1,000 nociceptors go off. And your brain goes, ow! Ah! And it sends you that signal, and it wants you to feel pain so that you will respond. Pain is really just trying to get your attention. It's your brain trying to get your attention. It's not a perfect system. Sometimes we feel phantom pain. Sometimes, whatever. But the fact is, it is your brain taking the dee-dee-dee-dee-dees and it's going, wake up. There's something serious going on, and your survival depends on it. And so I'm going to push this up to a higher level. Just like if I was trying to get your guys' attention, I might be like, come on, guys! Right? I might yell. Not a great strategy, but still, the point is, I'm going to increase the volume. Pain is just your brain increasing the volume of like, nope, that's not ice cream we're eating. You're sawing your finger off, right? So nociceptors are meant to actually tell you if you are doing damage to tissue. Let's talk a little bit about other types of receptors that kind of tie into PNF stretching. Your book makes a big difference about something called external receptors and internal receptors, which just mean external and internal receptors. These are the words I hate, because they're receptors on the outside of your body that feel things on the outside of your body, like your skin and touch, and then there's receptors on the inside of your body that feel how far your muscles are stretching. So they're giving names to things that they're all receptors, and you're never going to hear those terms again for the rest of your life after today's homework. Nobody ever talks about them. They just talk about the actual receptors. But the internal receptors are called proprioreceptors, and hopefully this word sounds familiar because it comes from proprioreceptive neuromuscular facilitation. Proprioreception means the ability to see oneself. Now, we don't think about this very often, but it's very weird that I can close my eyes and know that my arm is out here doing this. It doesn't seem weird probably to you because you're like, well, of course you can. But why? Why do you know that you're sitting in a chair right now? Why do you know that you did something? Why can you close your eyes and move your body and know where it is? Because you have proprioreceptors, things inside you that allow you to see your position in space. And they tell you a couple things. They tell you how much stretch is going on. Those are the ones we used in the stretching thing. They tell you how much speed is occurring. They know when you're moving fast. In fact, the minute I just tried to throw out my arm there, my body actually stopped it so I wouldn't hyperextend my elbow. It doesn't really want to let me do that. I can override it, which I don't want to do, but it tries to stop me. And these proprioreceptors also tell me the angle my joints are at. They tell me I'm at 90 degrees. I mean, they don't say 90 degrees, but they tell my brain something that I'm like, oh, that's 90 degrees, and my brain remembers that feeling as 90 degrees. So these are, some people call them mechanoreceptors. They watch the the mechanics of your brain and things like that. And you don't have to remember all the fancy names, but the point is, this is stuff that tells how far your joints are bending. This is the stuff we're working with in massage. These proprioreceptors, these things on nerves that send stuff inside my body to tell me like, hey dude, you have stretched your bicep too far and you're about to hyperextend your elbow even though your eyes are closed and you can't see it. I'm telling you that's what's going on. You better do something about it. These are proprioreceptors. Yes, Ms. Cuppage, please talk to me.
I have a quick question. So there's things like muscle memory, right?
Yes.
Whether or not we're holding our body in the right posture, or
It's used a lot of different ways, but yeah.
So when we're massaging somebody and we're maybe trying to change the muscle memory of what has now become comfortable, how long does that take to kind of undo the damage? Does it just depend on? We're not going to be miracle workers after one, right?
Well, it depends. So it depends on exactly what the problem is and how ingrained it is. So Mr. McClure gave a really, really, really good answer to this question in a way, which is if it's basically, Mr. McClure had his finger down like this for how long, sir? Maybe a month or something? I don't know. A month.
3 weeks.
2 weeks.
3 weeks.
So his body hadn't frozen up then. His finger, that wasn't quite long enough for his finger to truly, the tendons and ligaments to truly shorten and the whole thing just to become, and there's probably a little bit of shortening, don't get me wrong. But his problem was mostly mental. His brain was like, that finger goes down. That's what it does. And 3 weeks is a long time to train your body that that's what we do. Like, that's how my hand is. So him doing exercises in a mirror helped to reset that pretty quickly, I'm assuming.
How long did it take?
About an hour.
An hour?
Yeah.
Wow.
Because he didn't have tissue set in. Now, and that's a really great example. Let's say that, they did that to him on purpose, but it's kind of like an injury he had. I know he had an injury that led to this, but I meant his finger being sewn down. It's kind of like an injury he had. If that injury went on longer, though, his tissue would have started to adapt to it. His body would have said, these ligaments don't need to be that long. These tendons don't need to be that long. And so he'd now have to overcome the mental part, and we'd also have to stretch back out the tissue, and that takes longer. So,
what's a muscle or tendon? I don't know. Do tendons atrophy or just muscles?
Yeah, both do.
And once they've atrophied, is that it's possible to get that muscle back?
Oh, yeah.
Fully functioning?
Yeah. Yeah, soft tissue stuff's the best problem to have because it's got blood going to it, it's dynamic, and it changes.
Okay.
And along this whole line of discussion, I find the mind is much, including especially mine, is much harder to work with than the body.
Right.
But yes, the muscle will come back. I've seen people come from amazing things. Yes, it will come back. But anyway, to answer your question, how long? It depends on how long they built that in there and how willing they are to work with you, how open-minded they are. Are they doing stretches outside of your massage? Is it all up to you? Are they going right back to the bad behavior? If Mr. McClure is doing this thing in the mirror, but then he just decides he walks out there and pulls his finger right back down again, like that's a problem.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just using that example, really more, the stuff we deal with more is somebody kind of walking around like this and we get them kind of straightened out, but they walk back out again, and maybe part of their problem is emotional. So, they're kind of slouching down from life.
Yeah.
And you will see this in clients. You might even see this in yourself. Don't ever tell a client that. Don't be like, oh, you're slouching down because you're depressed. Just think it in your head. But many of us play small, and this is a very normal thing. Where we collapse in on ourselves. Well, if you do that for 20 years, your body, I've now got to make you play big in your head, and we've got to open up your body. And the neat thing is the two go together very well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, of the most important proprioreceptors to a massage therapist are muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs. Golgi tendon organs Golgi tendon organs stop what we were trying to do with Heather there. Golgi tendon organs sense if your tendon's getting stretched too far and then cause the muscle to flex and tighten up. That's all they do. But you might hear about these. You might hear about proprioreceptors. You should know the word proprioreceptors. The receptors inside your body that measure stretch and how far you bend and all that kind of stuff. The receptors allow you to see inside yourself, basically. And of these, there's these two proprioreceptors that some people call mechanoreceptors because they watch the mechanics. But anyway, the Golgi tendon organ is something you might hear about. In fact, you will hear about probably again as a massage therapist. And it's sensing stretch. And if it goes too far, it tends to fire that muscle to stop it from stretching further, believe it or not. Muscle spindles are in muscle and they sense for rapid expansion, rapid stretch. They too fire to stop a stretch. And they're the reason that we stretch slowly. And they're brilliant, by the way. Thank God you have muscle spindles, because when you're doing something stupid, like at a concert and you're throwing your hands up in the air or whatever, they're the thing that's like, oh my gosh, this guy's accelerating his arm so fast that if we don't slow him down at the end, he's going to tear a muscle. So, kind of like the Golgi tendon complex, but the Golgi tendon complex can be set off even when you're going slow. It could just be like, we're getting stretched too far. The muscle spindles tend to get set off just from going too fast, especially towards the end of the movement, obviously. And they'll cause you to stop right at the end so that you don't tear something. Mr. Penrod?
Sorry.
Oh, it's okay. You just unmuted, so I thought maybe you had something to say. Yes, Mr. Bigelow.
I just had a question about the stretching and how you were talking with Ms. Cuppage about, muscle memory. Isn't it like an ongoing thing? Like if somebody comes in, you're stretching them or you're working them and getting the range of motion, yet they just go home and they go right back into like you were saying, in the same position or doing the same work. Isn't it like a never-ending battle?
Yeah, it's a never-ending battle. Never-ending battle that you're getting paid for.
Yeah, it's like job security. However, like if they just go home and isn't it just gonna be a never-ending process?
Yep.
And I guess that's when home stretching and them trying to actually make a difference would come in, right?
Yeah. Everything's about participation. I feel this way as a teacher, by the way, right? Some of you pay attention to, I don't mean this judgmentally either. I really don't. I don't feel that way about it. But some of you pay attention to my lectures and take notes, and others of you are multitasking while I lecture, right? Some of you are going to learn the material really well. Others of you are not going to get your money's worth. But it's either way I get paid and I'm here, right? And either way I do care. I wish everybody was doing the pay attention. I wish everybody was doing the homework. And you wish all your clients were doing the homework, and you do care. But if they don't, that's okay too. And so, I've had clients like, how can I make this better? Well, you could stretch at home. What if I don't want to? Well, you can come see me more often. I've even had clients tell me, I better just pay you. Okay, come see me 3 times a week. I'll stretch you 3 times a week. I'd love that. I really mean it. Like, if you can afford it, that's cool. So, but you're right. You definitely have clients that I really feel what you're doing is maintaining their level of just getting by. They're like, when I come see you, my back's fine. It's okay. As long as I come see you once a week, it's fine. And I don't really want to change anything else. And I'm like, I hope we can all relate to that. There are things in my life that I really should improve. But they're okay. They're okay. And I'm not quite willing to do that at this moment. I'm working on something else or I'm lazy or whatever. Yeah, but you're absolutely right, sir. Anyway, remember muscle spindles and Golgi tendon organs basically stop you from stretching too far or too fast. And that's why we stretch slowly, so we don't set off a muscle spindle and tear something. Or just set off a muscle spindle and stop the stretch we're doing. And the Golgi tendon organs are the reason we have them press against us in proprioreceptive neuromuscular facilitation. They're the main thing we're trying to reset is the Golgi tendon organ set point. Yeah. Okay. And we talked about reciprocal inhibition already. Reciprocal inhibition is that your body usually shuts down the opposing muscle when you're using another muscle. So if we have the client help us lift the leg, it shuts down the muscle that's stopping the leg from lifting, which helps us go further. So I was mixing all three of these together. I stretch them slow so I don't set off the muscle spindle. I have them push against me to reset the Golgi tendon organ's limits. I have them help me lift the leg to use reciprocal inhibition to shut down the hamstring so we can lift it higher. That's it in a nutshell. And actually, this bottom thing, I think I wrote this bottom thing in this slide.
Can you keep
That's it.
that slide up there for just a second?
I sure can. It's worth copying down. I agree, Ms. Covich. I think this is PNF stretching, like it says it all right here. Really, the bottom sentence stuff, not even the top stuff. Yes, Miss Mitchell.
Is there a benefit to stretching and then massaging, or massaging and then stretching?
Curse you, I don't know the answer. It's a great question. I don't know the answer. If I had to guess, I would say massage first, right? Because you warm up the tissue, and it's always good to have tissue warmed up before you stretch it. I think it's probably safer. Massage it first, then stretch it. Because massage is a stretch, but it's kind of a way to get blood in there and get the tissue warmed up, and it's more supple, and yada, yada, yada. I would say massage it first, then stretch it. By the way, for those of you that like to get a little cray-cray, you can do both together. What? A massage is a micro stretch. I'm pressing in this area and stretching the tissue out in that area. Bending over and touching my toes is a macro stretch. It means big. I could lift, and by the way, I've done this. That's what I'm going to tell you. So I can take the client's leg, raise it slowly so I don't set off the muscle spindles, get to their limit, hold it there for 20 seconds because Miss Cuppage says that's a good way to go, and I agree with her. Have them press against me to reset the Golgi tendon. So now they're pressing really hard. I have them let go. Now the Golgi tendon's like, oh, we can go further. Have them help me lift with their quads, really just one quad, but anyway. And that sends a signal to release the hamstrings, get it up higher. Do that a few times, and then while it's up here, I can massage the hamstring. The beauty of that is I've just mixed 4 really wonderful things together. But here's the other beauty. Have you guys ever noticed sometimes when you go like to touch your toes or something like that, you really only feel the stretch in one area? Like it really hurts in one part of your hamstring or one part of your calf? So when I run my hand down that, it's almost like I'm increasing the stretch in each little area I'm going by. Right? I'm kind of turbocharging the stretch you're already in each little area because that's really how it works. You got this whole chain of cells there. We're kind of turbocharging the stretch in each little area. And it's very effective. So massaging muscles in a stretch. The only thing I will tell you about massaging muscles in a stretch is it's more painful too. So I've had a client that can't handle pressure. I don't put them in a stretch and then massage them. But if they can handle pressure and you want to get a lot of work done really fast, put somebody in a stretch and then massage them. You're double stretching them. Very effective. Mr. Bigelow.
Yeah, I had a question, and Miss Smith's question kind of spurred this on. I watch a lot of YouTube videos of, like, you know, people giving massages and techniques and whatnot, and I've often heard, like, therapists say, you know, that they want to get the old blood out and new blood in. So is that technically true that, like, blood can just, like, be stagnant and be in an area? I thought it was always circulating.
No, it's basically a true statement.
Okay.
You definitely have poor blood flow in some areas, and which means the blood is hanging out there longer than when it gets back. And it's a pretty good statement. Your body is kind of a sponge, and they really are wringing it out into the water. They're definitely increasing the blood flow that's going through that area, right? So there's newer blood coming in faster. And that means that in areas where there's poor blood flow, the blood is sitting there longer. And so
and then
it is older.
I guess it would deplete with the oxygen, right?
Yes.
Or
It would be oxygen depleted, and also there'd be like debris in there. And I don't mean, people call it toxins. I don't really like that term, but it would be debris. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
I basically agree with the concept, yeah. And I actually think it's a big part of what we're doing in massage. Wringing out the dirty sponge and pumping new blood in there. Yes, that would happen anyway, but we're possibly increasing it by tenfold. Yeah. Mr. Kachekian, sir.
I have a question, but I'm not sure if it's true or not. Is it true that a person can stretch another person more than that person can stretch themselves?
Yeah, I would think so. Yeah.
Like deeper?
I just think
more
I'm just sure
effectively?
I can push your leg farther than you can push it. Sure. Which is why I need to be careful. Because I can push it far enough to break your leg, to rip the tendons, rip the ligaments, things like that. So yes, sir, I agree.
Okay.
Yeah, Miss Smith.
I was just gonna kind of go off of what Mr. Bigelow was saying.
Please.
I like to think of it as like old dirty pipes. You know, you get the plaque buildup on the outside,
Sure.
or like your toothpaste bottle. How you have to squeeze the very last bit that stays on the very sides of it out, like by compressing it, you know? Out. So, like, I like to think of that as the inside of your blood vessels, how, you know, like, it just kind of gets its gunk built up. And that, like, has a lot to do with a lot of other things, like diet and
Sure.
how much you work out and all that kind of stuff. But, yeah, I think massage definitely, like, benefits it.
And by the way, we're not just talking about blood vessels. When the blood vessels release at the end in the capillaries, that's just going into tissue. That's just a flower bed of blood that your cells live in. That area can get very stagnant, and guess what? When it gets stagnant, it tends to get sticky. And it tends to not let more blood flow in. And this could be like why we see knots and things like that. So you're kind of waking back up the tissue and getting blood to kind of flow. You're tilling the soil. Yes. Yeah, all that. Very good. Okay, everybody. Mr. Penrod, yes, sir.
Oh, I mean, I was just gonna say a story that I knew of. Like, there's like a very extreme, but like, I was reading this book and he's going through. I can't remember what it's called, but his thighs or his legs just were so tight that muscle, like the blood, literally couldn't go through it. He's basically saying like trying to inject blood into like this frozen steak.
Yeah,
That's basically like what happens if you don't like stretch or stuff like that. Like you could get that tight. So
yeah,
just a little story.
There's actually a lot of bodybuilders that feel that way, that they stretch to make their fascia get bigger to make more space for the muscle and blood flow. Yeah, I can see that totally. All right, everybody. I just have a couple pathologies to go through with you, and then it's on to homework time. One is I don't normally hear it called this way, but there's something called double crush syndrome. This is not when you like two people at the same time. That's something different. This really should be called double impingement syndrome. And I could care less what it's called, but the point is really valid. Remember I said that there's a wire going from my head, down my neck, coming out the side of my neck, all the way down my arm to my pinky. By the way, there's a wire coming down my head, out my neck, just right to here, and right another way here, and every place I feel, but I'm using this example. Okay. That wire can get pinched, right? We said that. It can get pinched. And if it gets pinched, and it's a motor neuron, it might be hard for me to move my hand. If it gets pinched, and it's a sensory neuron, like something that senses stuff, I might feel pain and think it's actually in my hand, but it might just be pinched in my wrist, right? A nerve can be pinched in two areas. This is actually very important. I could have a pinching in my wrist of a nerve, and a pinching in my elbow, and a pinching of the same nerve up here. If you have a pipe, since Miss Smith brought up pipes, I love that. If you had a pipe and it had 3 valves on it, and you turned each valve off just halfway, no one valve would be a big problem, but at the end you wouldn't get a lot of water out of it, would you? And that's actually fairly common. So I'm telling you this because a lot of people are like, we got to find out where this nerve is pinched. It's not necessarily just one place. They might have double crush syndrome. They might have triple crush syndrome. So I don't normally hear it called that. We just call it multiple impingements. But your book seems to like this term. But my point as a massage therapist is don't assume it could be pinched. If I'm having problems in my hand, I could actually have problems in my hand. I could have a pinched nerve in my neck, pinched nerve underneath my pec minor here, same pinched nerve in my elbow, and same pinched nerve in my wrist. It could be same nerve pinched all the way along, which is making my fingers tingle. So I'm not looking for one pinching. I'm going to work this whole track. When somebody says something hurts, unless I'm 100% positive it's right in that area, I tend to work it back to the spine. I'd work the whole arm back to the spine. Mr. Bigelow.
I just wanted to I've been wondering this, and I guess I could use the internet and look it up myself, but when you're talking pinched nerves, what is that actually, like, to pinch something is usually trapping something in between two things. Like, are we talking about them being pressed up against bone, and that causes the pinched nerve, or up against muscles, or all of the above?
All of the above. Against bone's an easy one, right? But remember, these nerves they're very, very tiny, so they're going through fascia, and they can get kind of pinched in the fascia. If that fascia's sticky there, they can get pinched in the fascia. They can actually stick to the fascia even and kind of pull on it a little bit, and that's enough to set it off.
Okay.
Yeah,
So if like the muscle's really tight and contracted, it can pinch the nerve. So
a muscle can pinch on its own nerve even. So the muscle gets really contracted, pinches on its nerve. That sends you a pain signal. What do you do when you have pain? You tense up. That muscle tenses up. It tenses up, pinches on that nerve more, sends more of a pain signal. What do you do when you feel pain? You tense up. What happens when you tense up? You pinch on the nerve more. You get more pain. We call that a pain cycle. It's one of the things we try to do in massage. We rub it out and people are like, oh my gosh, it's gone. Yeah, you were just in a pain cycle.
Cool. Thank you.
So this double crush syndrome is really, really important when you're dealing with certain types of problems. Anybody ever heard of carpal tunnel syndrome? Good. It's a problem of the nerve in your wrist. Anybody ever heard of thoracic outlet syndrome? Thoracic outlet syndrome is nothing more. Sorry, I'm trying to get my slide to go here. Jeez, come on. Come on. No. Thoracic outlet syndrome is just a pinched brachial nerve. Let me show you something. Oh, here we go. Okay. This is an arm. Kind of cool. Scapula back here. Right here. So, underneath this arm, in the axillary region, this yellow stuff you're seeing here is why we don't push right into somebody's armpit. This is your brachial plexus. It's coming out from your neck, by the way, coming down in here and going down your arm. And by the way, there are arteries and veins next to it too, because they all tend to run next to each other, which is why we don't push into people's armpits, because there's not much protecting here. It runs down your arm and eventually parts of it go underneath your wrist. People often get carpal tunnel, which is shown up as weakness in the wrist, pain in the wrist, weakness in the wrist usually, because the nerves that control motor function are getting pinched in here. They go to the doctor. Doctor says, yep, you got carpal tunnel. We should do surgery on it. They do surgery on it. Carpal tunnel's not that much better. Can't figure it out. Oh, sorry. It was the brachial plexus and it was pinched up here instead. Oh well, it's only surgery. I can pinch this nerve up here and give you carpal tunnel symptoms down here. That's double crush syndrome. And it can cause people to misdiagnose carpal tunnel. And quite often they'll be like, we didn't misdiagnose it, we can prove it's pinched down here. Yep, you proved it's pinched down here, but did you prove it wasn't pinched up here too? And did you prove it wasn't pinched in the elbow? Because I've seen it where it's pinched in all three places. That's not uncommon. How do we know? We don't. So when somebody comes to me with carpal tunnel syndrome, I'm going to do what I'm about to show you on the slideshow, but I'm going to work their entire arm. And the brachial plexus, by the way, runs underneath. I hope we know what this symbol means. I hope by now you know what this symbol means. Yep.
Pec minor.
Pec minor. It runs underneath the pec minor, underneath my collarbone. And since we learned yesterday, where do all the nerves that feed my arm come from? Are we going to work the low back? No, 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 no. We're going to work the cervical region. So I'm going to work the wrist, up the arm. I'm going to loosen up the pec minor underneath the collarbone here and work the neck because it could be pinched in all those areas. Now, I could be wrong. It might be none of that stuff. But you're out $100 and I didn't cut through the flexor retinaculum of your wrist because that's one of the ways that they solve carpal tunnel. And it would be great if it did work. But a lot of people have 2 carpal tunnel surgeries because the first one doesn't take. And by the way, they just don't get a third one usually when the second one doesn't take because they finally give up at that point. It's not a very successful surgery. There are some micro ones that have gotten better. Don't get me wrong. I'm not all down on surgery. There are times to do it. But I'm really for physical therapy and massage therapy before we do the surgery to make sure it's really necessary. And lifestyle change too. And by the way, a lot of people suffering from carpal tunnel, what are they doing? They're not roofers, which is weird. They're not day laborers. They're not doing that kind of stuff. They're not doing hard work. They're on a keyboard doing this. And I grew up with mechanical typewriters. You guys don't even know what those are. Where you had to hit the keys, man. You had to hit them. Yeah. Now, you just go like this, and all of a sudden everybody's like, my wrists hurt. It might not be your wrists. It might be that you're like this all day long. What would this do? Would this pinch on my brachial plexus? But we make the biggest mistake. Medical professionals make this mistake. They go, oh, he's got a pain in the wrist, carpal tunnel, because they're used to seeing it. Guy comes in like this, yep, it's carpal tunnel. Never even thought, like, it's showing itself as carpal tunnel, but probably sitting at the desk 10 hours a day with my boss yelling at me under stress for 40 years is the bigger problem. If we don't fix this lifestyle problem and start to open up the shoulder and the brachial plexus, none of this is going to matter. That's why double crush syndrome matters. That's why anatomy matters. Because if I don't know where the pec minor is and I don't know how to rub it and stuff like that, it doesn't matter. Mr. Kachekian, sir. Yes, sir.
If somebody comes to you with carpal tunnel, could exercise be a remedy for that, like to strengthen those areas?
Yes, although it's not usually a weakening like that. So I'm actually going to talk about that right now.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm not trying to shut you down. I'm just trying to say, like, I'm going to try to answer that question right now. Okay.
No.
Sorry, my computer's all over the place. All right. So here's how carpal tunnel syndrome works. You have a ligament that they call the transverse carpal ligament. You also have flexor retinaculum there, which is that ribbon-like fascia that goes around your wrist, that runs over your wrist like this, and it makes a tunnel. That ligament is the top of a tunnel over the bones of your wrist. And all the nerves and muscles have to run up underneath here. All the tendons and ligaments and nerves and blood vessels and everything have to run underneath that thing. And it makes a tunnel. That thing is the ligament's the top of the tunnel, my wrist bone's at the bottom of the tunnel. And there's a tiny little tunnel there that goes through there. By the way, you need this because if you didn't have your ligaments going under here, when you flexed your wrist like this, your ligaments would pop off your arm. It would look gross. It would pop out here. It's creating a pulley for your ligaments to work with. It's creating a pulley. It's how your body does this to your ankles a lot too. But it really is a pulley, so I can bend my wrist like this and do cool things like this. I don't know why I never want to do this, but sometimes I do, like in class today. And that's because I'm able to take tension from here, run it around a pulley here, come down to my forearms, and my forearms puppet my fingers. That's why you need a flexor retinaculum and a transverse carpal ligament right here. So that creates the carpal tunnel. Well, that's a tiny tunnel. And if it gets irritated in there, it can pinch on the nerves coming through there. And some of those are motor nerves, the things that tell my hands to move, and I start to feel weakness in my wrist. And I go to a doctor and they say, you've got carpal tunnel. Or I go to my massage therapist, because you will get clients that have carpal tunnel. Miss Zawick, yes ma'am.
What if it's just like inflammation from irritation and not like anything, I guess, like bad? Would you just like pop some ibuprofen, that inflammation would go down and bye-bye nerve pain?
Yeah, probably. In fact, carpal tunnel often is inflammation in that area.
So why don't people just take NSAIDs and then the inflammation goes away?
Because that only works if they change the lifestyle that was causing the carpal tunnel in the first place. The idea is great. They should do exactly what you're saying. I'm 100% with you. They should do exactly what you're saying. The thing is that they also need to stop working at the computer the way they are. Yeah. So, but she's right, everybody. Yeah, it could just be a little inflammation thing in there. It's a very small tunnel, and so it doesn't take much improvement. So let's talk about what we do if we get a client that gets this. The first thing is you cannot promise to cure. You are not licensed or allowed to promise to cure, and you don't always cure, so don't promise. But if Miss Zawick comes to me with carpal tunnel, and she says, my doctor tells me I've got carpal tunnel, they're thinking about surgery, but I was going to try some massage first, what do you think? I'd say, I think it's a great idea. I think in 3 massages you can tell if it's helping or not. And I think that's worth a couple $100 it's going to cost to find out. And you really don't want to cut into your wrists and hands if you don't have to. And she'll be like, okay, that's cool. You're not promising, but whatever. And I'm going to do some of the following. By the way, this is carpal tunnel that's gone on so long that this person has received so little signals to their muscles in their thumb here that the muscles in their thumb have atrophied. That's what they're showing you here. So their thumb pad, which is called your thenar eminence, it's made up of 3 muscles that go to your thumb that all have the word pollicis in them, because all muscles that go to your thumb have the word pollicis in them. They have not got any signals from nerves coming up through the wrist to fire, and so because it's so badly pinched, that they have atrophied. This has gone on way too long. This person's waited way too long. What they'll often do in carpal tunnel surgery is cut this ligament to make more space in here. Now, the problem with this procedure is that when you cut things in the human body, you tend to build up scar tissue. Your body tries to repair them. And if you build up scar tissue in the carpal tunnel, guess what? You've got carpal tunnel syndrome again. This is why they sometimes perform the surgery more than once. So that's a problem. So what do? You can literally do a massage to widen the carpal tunnel. Miss Magruder, yes ma'am.
Yes, I have a question. What if you have like arthritis, like right there?
I don't know how to answer the question. I mean, you could have arthritis right there. Are you saying that could be causing the carpal tunnel?
I'm saying like having carpal tunnel in arthritis, and that's like in palm of hand, like right here. It can get swollen and
Yeah, it's not as common. Usually it's more in the joints up in your fingers and things like that, but you could. And that would cause problems inside that area too, sure. I don't know if I'm quite answering your question, but yeah. It's not as common to get it in that area, but yes, you could. And arthritis is inflammation, and inflammation in that area could pinch on the nerves there. And that would not be good, you're right. So you could have a dual problem. You could have arthritis and carpal tunnel, and they could be making each other worse, yes, if that's what you're asking.
yeah.
So I took off the slideshow because I want you to be able to see my hand. This is called your thenar eminence. Thenar eminence means something that rises up, usually out of the ground. But anyway, thenar eminence. This, my pinky pad, which is underneath my thumb pad in this case, is called my hypo. Hypo means below, thenar eminence. Thenar eminence, hypothenar eminence. Massage therapists often use these terms. They're not that unusual. So you might hear these again. You'll definitely hear them from me. My thenar eminence, this pad is not fat. It's made up of 3 muscles. There are 3 muscles right here. I'm not talking about my webbing here. That's something different. 3 muscles that go to my thumb, all have the word polysis in it. How convenient is that? Did I ever mention that polysis, by the way, is on every single thumb muscle that you have? Could be important. Could be the kind of thing that shows up on a test at the end of the year. Anyway, that takes care of like 8 thumb muscles right there. They all have the word polysis in them. Your hypothenar eminence, by the way, has 3 muscles in it too that all go to your little digit. Guess what, by the way? They all have the word digiti minimi in them. Like $1 million digiti minimi. I'm not making this up. One is called the flexor digiti minimi, one's called the opponens digiti minimi, and one's called the abductor digiti minimi. Anyway, that doesn't matter. The fact is they all have digiti minimi in it, and that does matter. That's so cute. If you see digiti minimi, it's either going to your little pinky or your pinky toe every time. Isn't that convenient? Oh my gosh. This area over here and this area over here are where the ligament attach and the flexor retinaculum attach that make your carpal tunnel. What? I wonder, Tapscott, if I were to roll the thumb out, not up here, not hurting it, grab the thumb pad and roll it out at the same time as grabbing the pinky pad and rolling it out, if I would stretch that carpal tunnel. How much do I have to stretch it? Well, the carpal tunnel is pretty small. 1/4 millimeter? Might be enough to change the whole thing. Pinching of nerves is really weird, right? They're not pinched, they're not pinched, they're not pinched until they're pinched. They're just like us, right? You're not irritated until you're irritated, right? There's a threshold there. You can stretch out the carpal tunnel and roll these pads back and try to open them up. Sometimes I grab them with a sheet, just get extra pressure on them and hold them and stretch them out and start to open that area. I don't rub in here a lot because that's going to irritate right in here. I'm grabbing out here and opening this up and stretching out the carpal tunnel. But I don't stop there because I paid attention in anatomy class. I now rub all the flexors of the forearm because they could be tight and just their tension could be irritating this whole area. And I know that all these flexors of my forearm go underneath this little sucker right here. Go right under here. Hook into here. So I rub all these. And then I work the elbow really good too because I know the nerves run through this area and you just never know. They could be pinched in there. Then I massage the whole arm up here and boy do I work underneath the pec minors and things like that. But I don't stop there either because I really paid attention in anatomy class. I remember that all the nerves that feed the arm come from the neck. So then I work up the neck and I work the whole neck region. And that's my carpal tunnel treatment thing that I got because I paid attention in anatomy class and I now know that it could be all of those things or one of those things. And unfortunately, it could be none of those things. I could be wrong. But no damage done. And so I work neck, thoracic outlet stuff, chest, pecs, arm, elbow, forearm flexors, and open up the carpal tunnel. And the client's like, why are you doing all this stuff? And you say things like, well, a lot of people misdiagnose. I can't diagnose, by the way. I'm just a simple massage therapist. You act very humble, but it really might not just be pinched at your wrist. It could be pinched up at your thoracic region here, or even in your neck region. Do you have tension in your neck? Oh my God, do I have tension in my neck? My neck bothers me all the time. Could be that too. Your shoulders are kind of hunched too. Do you work at a computer? Yes, I do. Oh my gosh, I've never had anybody say this to me before. You will have this happen. I mean, I am trying to be funny and obnoxious, but you will have this happen. And you're going to have this kind of progressive way to actually look at a problem, because like in our own lives, problems are rarely one thing. Right? If you guys have any problems in your life, there's just one thing, just tell me about it. We'll fix it. It's one thing. They're never like that. They're a chain of things. They're always a chain of things. Miss Cafiso, yes ma'am, talk to me.
On that note, let me tell you about the problem I have. Just kidding. Is there any, if we're trying to help them with the carpal tunnel syndrome and we're massaging, there's no damage we're going to be able to do. It's not going to harm them in any way, unless of course they say ouch. But I mean, there's nothing we're going to be able to do that would make it, would increase that.
No. I mean, don't get me wrong. You could bend their wrist way back.
Sure.
I mean, stuff like that. But it's highly, highly unlikely that you're going to break something that's broken more. Nope. You're good.
Okay, and then ultimately it just seems like I like doing hand massages, so I'm just going to incorporate that because people suddenly realize, like, oh my gosh, that feels so much better than I would have thought it would feel. So
yes, and actually, I appreciate you saying that too, Ms. Caviso, because One of the other things we're trying to do just in our massage is just do stuff that other people don't do, right? Where people, I've had many people be like, I don't like having my feet done. Really? Let me work on your feet. Okay, one time. Oh my God, I love that. Yeah. Because you do it better, right? Have you guys ever had something you didn't like eating? And then you had somebody who made it who's really good, and you're like, oh, I like that thing. Yeah. Yeah. So, escargot is snails. And I'm not a big escargot fan. My mother won a contest for cooking escargot. And when I had her escargot, I was like, oh, I guess I like escargot, right? But I've definitely had it before. It was like, oh, no, 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 no. Anyway, same thing with massage. Yeah? So that is carpal tunnel, and I hope what you really got out of this too is this whole concept that anatomy actually matters, and that what we're doing here matters, and then understanding that nerves can be pinched in multiple areas matters, understanding where the nerves come from that go from the brain through the spine, out the side of the spine, and that all the cervical ones can go to the arm, thoracic ones go to the thoracic region and onward, understand they can be pinched in multiple areas, understand the muscles that are in those areas so I can massage them to help bring relief for people. And the cool thing about massage is you're not a surgeon, so if you're wrong, you haven't done anything except waste a little bit of their time and money. And so in massage, we actually use a very different approach to therapy, just so you guys are aware. The approach we use in therapy is kind of to spray and pray, which is a terrible expression, actually. I'm using a Vietnam expression. But anyway, the idea is we shoot at everything that might be because we've got nothing to lose. If I rubbed your neck and you didn't need it, who doesn't need a neck rub anyway? Who doesn't enjoy their hand being rubbed anyway? There's nothing to lose in this approach. So hit everything you think something might be. Heck, if I had more time, I might rub your feet too and just see if some reflexology helps your hand. Why not? Throw it in there. You've got nothing to lose. Yeah? Cool. All right. I think that's a good place to stop and give you guys time to do your homework because I promised I would do that.